Welcome to another episode of the Ground Pwned podcast, a weekly show for fans of combat sports, gaming, entertainment, and plenty more. I'm Brian Shea, online content director at Game Informer, joined as always by Scott Fontana, the New York Post's MMA reporter. I am not going to lie, I am exhausted. I am just getting back from Vegas for International Fight Week, while Scott is probably equally as exhausted, coming off a busy weekend covering UFC 276. So because of that, if I was a betting man, which I'm not, even though I was in Vegas, I'd say this is going to be another MMA heavy show. But first, Scott, how are you doing today?
Like you said, maybe a little tired. Still recovering from, I was up very late writing up my column for the New York Post off of the event. And so that involved having to make sure I stay up for media availability so that I can get in any quotes. Those go very, very late if you're on the on the East Coast, excuse me. So I think Volkanovski was done talking around 3 a.m. local time, not local time, Eastern time where I am. And that's it's a little late.
Oh,
you
no.
have to write it up a little bit because I had written most of it. It was really just kind of putting my quotes in and that kind of thing. And then you kind of need to come down from that. So when am I going to bed? I don't know. 4 a.m.
I think that so at the peak of my MMA fandom, I would stay up and watch all the post-fight press conferences, watch Dana, watch all the fighters. And there's always there could be up to 30 minutes in between the fighters too. If you've never stayed up and watched them live, I think the UFC sometimes will put an edited together version where it's they cut out all the dead space, where it's just a camera focused on an empty seat and a desk with a microphone sitting there and usually a can of Monster Energy that nobody drinks out of.
Yeah.
And, I would say about half the time I would fall asleep and drop my phone on my bed. So what I would do is I'd finish the fights. I'd go up, brush my teeth, get ready for bed, then go up to bed and just put on YouTube on the UFC's channel and watch the live stream. Now that's less of an occurrence because usually by this point, when the fights end, I am ready to just go the hell to sleep.
Because you're getting older, sir.
Exactly. And boy, did I feel that in Vegas. Each night I wanted to go party. And then I was just there's no way I am able to do anything else after the activities that I had planned, which usually wrapped up around 11 or 12. And I was just nope, bedtime. But so Scott, coming into this fight, UFC 276, we were very high. If you listen to last week's episode, I think we called it on paper, this is the best pay-per-view of the year.
On paper.
How do you think it stacked up to that?
I'll kind of pose that question to myself in the sense of did we get our money's worth?
Mm-hmm.
Because we felt like it on paper was very much worth $75, but did the action come through as a $75 value in terms of what we paid for? I don't know about that, man. I really don't. I think it actually sincerely or distinctly underwhelmed on the pay-per-view portion. I think the prelims and everything like that are a very different animal because one, they were free. So we can't even factor that in. And I think
they didn't even need ESPN Plus. It was ABC.
No, it's true. You got some really great. And honestly, I thought those were a slam dunk.
I thought rabbit ears, they were yours.
I thought it went as fantastic as it really could have on the prelims, especially the ABC portion. But no, you had one fight that people were looking forward to that ends in an eye poke, no contest. That's already that's not. And by the way, none of this is reflective of the UFC itself. They did everything they could. It's not even reflective on the fighters. Things just happen, but we're just reacting to the way it went, right? So we lost a fight there, more or less, because we didn't get any closure or anything like that. And all we did was have a bunch of people complaining about, was his eye really that badly hurt? And then we see later, a day later, his eye looks distinctly terrible. And he's got a corneal abrasion, which doesn't sound great. So maybe we don't ding Pedro Munoz for, quote unquote, looking for a way out of a fight he was winning.
Here's the thing, though. I will ding the hell out of Sean O'Malley for doing his dumbass dribbling celebration while his opponent is blinded in an eye because of an eye poke that he did. And then his fight is ruled a no contest and he does the fadeaway jumper. Just sit down, dude. I get that's your personality. And when you win, and he usually wins impressively, feel free to stunt on your opponent. When you knock out anybody in just such an impressive fashion, do your thing. But when you do an eye poke and it ends in a no contest and it's 100% your fault, maybe just, quietly walk away in disappointment.
Listen, the guy posed out loud, why not just try heroin last year? So, hey, maybe this isn't a big brain guy. I kind of put my expectations there with it. But obviously, so we lost that fight. I think we had some good finishes, some good fights throughout the pay-per-view until the title fights. And then granted, Volkanovski and Holloway was a lopsided affair, but it was very much an entertaining, intriguing, and I think we all felt the energy that was going on in this fight. I think it delivered, even though it was entirely one-sided, one-way traffic. I think you just felt like you were watching something kind of special happen. Mm-hmm. I think in that sense, because we had somebody in there who totally distanced himself from another fellow legend at featherweight. But a lot hinges on the way the fight card ends, right? And Israel Adesanya's performance, while very impressive, left a lot of people underwhelmed. So, is it worth that? Can you come away from this event feeling like maybe it wasn't worth the $75 you paid, especially because it was hyped so well? Yeah, I think you can. I think it's fair.
I would say if you look at the 5-fight main card, 2.5 of those fights delivered. Yeah. I'm going to say Brian Barberena versus Robbie Lawler, absolute amazing fight.
Terrific fight.
Alex Pereira versus Sean Strickland. Hey, we got the highlight reel knockout. We got the catapulting to contendership that we wanted for Pereira.
And that was a best case scenario, I think, for just about everything except for maybe those who like cringeworthy trash talk in the build up to a fight, because that's not going to happen now with Sean Strickland out of the picture. But we did get the especially the action wise result we were looking for. Everyone wants like that big knockout, right? We got it here. It could have been if Sean Strickland maybe fought smart, maybe he fought to a way to like take him down a bunch of times, and that wouldn't have been necessarily the most aesthetically pleasing here. But no, he said, hey, I can stand with these glory kickboxing champions. And then he goes out there and he really just doesn't look like he can do that very well.
Sean Strickland's game plan finally lived up to his trash talk, which is just dumb as shit.
And leading to a hilarious end.
Yes, exactly. So, I think that Pereira knocking out Strickland was the thing that a lot of people wanted to see, whether you were wanting Strickland to get knocked out because of what he says and how he fights otherwise. And also because, people, as soon as Pereira signed with the UFC, people said, hey, he has 2 wins in kickboxing over? The champ, Israel Adesanya.
I mean, it's literally the reason he was signed. Yeah.
100%. So we talked about Volkanovski's virtuoso performance over Max Holloway just a little bit, but like you said, the fight card ending the way it did, Israel Adesanya cruising to a relatively one-sided decision. Cannonier really couldn't get anything off. And I mean, this is the way that I think a lot of us saw it going in terms of the scorecards. However, it just wasn't a fun fight to watch. And like people say, oh, well, it was like a tactical fight. But at the same time, like this is just, it's becoming a little bit of a trend. Like we see Israel Adesanya like completely knock out or like showcase his abilities, because he has a ton of ability. He might be the most skilled like high level striker we've ever seen in the UFC as far as like high level fighters. I mean, obviously we've gotten like the Gokhan Sakis and everything, but
and Alex Pereira
but like as far as like high level, like maybe we'll even say top 5 UFC MMA fighters, and we look at their pure striking ability, Israel Adesanya might be up there at the top. So he obviously has the skills. He's obviously had the highlight reel finishes, the one of the greatest fights of all time about Kelvin Gastelum. But then you also he has this weird juxtaposition that one of his favorite fighters of all time, Anderson Silva, also had that strange juxtaposition. But for every Forrest Griffin, you had a Damian Maia, and we're starting to get that with Israel. For every Kelvin Gastelum, we have a Yoel Romero, and it's like, all right, well, what is the Israel Adesanya? Like, what is his actual fighting style? Is it really that reliant on his dance partner?
It really is. It absolutely is reliant on the dance partner. I think we've seen that enough. And look, I'm actually going to give Adesanya here a lot more credit, I think, than a lot of people are giving him right now, because in those first 2 rounds of that fight over the weekend, in those first 2 rounds, Daniel Cormier correctly points out that this is a more aggressive Adesanya, right? Now, he's not winging punches in there. He's never going to do that because he knows better. But he is pressing the action a lot more than maybe just sitting back and counter-striking. And it was actually kind of impressive to watch him really do that for about 2 rounds. Then it starts to trail off as we're starting to see Cannonier, mixing in a little bit more clinching and that kind of thing. And ultimately, you see Adesanya just kind of settle in, seeming he's kind of like got this more or less. I don't think he kind of coasted. I really don't think that's what it was. It was just like there really wasn't that much that he was getting to work with, and he wasn't going to press it anymore because he tried. He wasn't feeling it. And it seemed like he was more settling into, okay, this is where I'm going to move more into like the counter-striking mode. So I'll just kind of work with what my opponent gives me here. And again, I don't blame him. I think there's a reason to do this. But the question I would ask you, being a fan of this sport, is, are the reactions to the way this fight went down justified, just from a pure fan perspective? Is it justified for fans to feel disappointed in that, especially when you factor in, and I'm going to preface it with these, when you factor in, one, the way Adesanya hypes it up in the sense that he wants to put out impressive performances, he wants to kind of make you entertained, right? It seems like that's what he really wants. He goes out there, he does the Undertaker walkout that everybody fawns over, right? And it was cool, but he walks out with a Jared urn. The implication being that he is going to bury Jared Cannonier. He did not bury Jared Cannonier. He didn't come close to burying Jared Cannonier. There's a level of expectation here, he said. So again, the question, are we justified, or are fans justified in feeling disappointed in this performance?
Well, let's look at his last few fights. So Cannonier, obviously we're talking about that, not a super great performance, right? Like, it's a good performance, but not a super entertaining fight.
Entertaining is, yeah.
Robert Whittaker, I'd say that was an entertaining fight. Robert Whittaker too. I would say it was an entertaining fight. It wasn't the highlight reel knockout of the first one, but it was a high level chess match, if nothing else. Vittori, I would say not an entertaining fight. Blachowicz, not super entertaining. Paulo Costa, highlight reel knockout. Yoel Romero, I don't need to even say it.
Terrible. Just terrible. And
then before that, it was Robert Whittaker, Kelvin Gastelum, Anderson Silva, and Derek Brunson. I would say the majority of those 4 fights were amazing. And it's like his entertaining fights are getting fewer and further between.
It's just farther away is really what it is. Or we only have one finish in the last, 3 years or something like that, right?
Yeah. Well, his last finish was Paulo Costa, and that was 2020,
spectacular,
which was amazing. And then before that, it was Robert Whittaker.
But that performance in there, the reason why he had that is because someone like Paulo Costa is he's kind of deficient in defense. So It was always going to happen. Like I think I knew going into that fight that there was a lot of people who were like, oh man, is Costa going to win? I never doubted that Israel Adesanya was going to win. And I always thought he would win by knockout. This fight, this one coming into Cannonier, I thought the most likely scenario was him by decision. I really did. And it manifested that way. But again, the question is, are you justified in feeling disappointed?
Of course. Well, that was my long scenic route that I was taking to say, you know what, when these unexciting fights are outliers, I think it could be an overreaction. When we saw the Vittori fight or the Yoel Romero fight, it was early on, we'd just come off of Robert Whittaker knockout. We've just come out of Kelvin Gastelum fight of the year. When you get to the Yoel Romero, it's like, okay, that was a really boring fight, but that's the outlier, right? Now it's almost like if he has an exciting fight, it's the outlier. And again, I'm not trying to take away the fact that he is one of the most skilled fighters we've maybe ever seen in the octagon as far as striking is concerned.
Different conversations.
He is fantastic. He's one of the pound for pound best in the entire UFC. Maybe all of MMA. I mean, that goes without saying when you're talking the UFC,
right? But and I would go one step further and say that I think we're going to look back at Adesanya's reign here for however long it lasts. We're going to look at the body of work, and we're going to be way more impressed with it overall than we are in the moment.
Well, yeah, when you look at the Wikipedia page and it's green, 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 the only red right now is Jan Blachowicz when he tried to go up and become a double champ. You look at his excitement level, though, it's becoming more and more the outlier that the exciting fights are like, going to happen. So it's like if I'm inviting a friend over for a UFC card and they're not really into UFC, and it's like, all right, well, it's Brandon Moreno versus Davison Figueiredo. I feel more confident in that than I would like Israel Adesanya against insert next middleweight contender here, that it's going to be an exciting fight. I don't want to end a fight card when I have a friend over who's never watched the UFC. And I've had friends over to watch Israel Adesanya who aren't really into the UFC. And, luckily it's delivered on those times. But, I'm just looking back at when Joanna and Zhang Weili put on the greatest female fight of all time, one of the greatest overall fights of all time. And then we went immediately into Israel versus Yoel. And it's like, damn, like that's such a come down. And that's almost what this felt like, because we came off of Alexander Volkanovski putting up one of the greatest performances in his division's history, one of the greatest performances of his career. And then we get this kind of, slow, less exciting, less impressive performance from the middleweight champ.
Maybe not less impressive. I think we're still talking more about less entertaining, right? At least
sure.
That's how I would frame it.
But I would say it's also less impressive in the sense that Alex just overshadowed Israel's performance, in that it was a more exciting, more dominant performance over, I would say, a more worthy opponent in his division.
Sure. And in that sense, it's justified. But also, you kind of hit something here, is the fact that he has now been overshadowed by the co-main event title fight 2 times in the last 3 years. That's there is kind of a pattern forming here. That's not really like the type of thing you want to be known for, where you're the anticlimactic ending after another champion's exciting fight. You don't want to be known as that. And it's going to start, people are going to start picking up on the pattern. Now, not everybody is going to feel the same way as Chris Pratt, where he was disappointed in the pitter patter that Israel Adesanya was putting on there. You didn't see this?
No, he did.
So they, for whatever reason, ESPN, I guess it was to promote this movie that he's in, which I'm not going to plug because I don't remember the name, and that's fine.
He had ESPN. He doesn't need Ground Pwned.
Sure, he doesn't. He absolutely doesn't, and I don't care to watch, to be honest. But that he's on there to talk about the fights because he was at the fights and everything, and they asked him, and he's like, if you're gonna go out there and you're gonna put on this pitter patter, and I'm paraphrasing here, you can find the real quote or whatever, but more or less. He did frame it as, look, I'm not a fighter, like I'm just an actor. Like he threw that out there and prefaced it the right way, in the sense of, why would you take anything I say seriously? And granted, everybody else ignored that. So I will give him that much. I don't want to just sit out. And he didn't seem to be as arrogant as to say, why aren't you doing that for me? But he is hitting the nail on the head with the way a lot of people are going to feel with that. A lot of, let's say, casual fight fans. I think probably you could put Chris Pratt in there as a casual fight fan. I think it's fair to say. I know he trains. I think he trains jiu-jitsu. But look, people can train jiu-jitsu and still be a casual fight fan, or they can watch no fights. My jiu-jitsu instructor did not watch UFC. He had guys in the UFC. He doesn't watch.
I would say Chris Pratt is one of the more informed celebrity fans, though. He's not what's the singer of the Red Hot Chili Peppers that's always there?
Flea.
No, not Flea.
Was it
the
Flea?
singer? The singer.
Oh,
why am I blanking on his name?
I don't know. I'm the one who doesn't know music. I didn't cover it.
Anthony Kiedis.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah, he's always at the fights. He's like probably the most hardcore, like him and like Joe Burrow now are apparently like the most hardcore MMA celebrity fans. But like I'd say Chris Pratt is up there. He's at a lot of fights.
Yeah, but once again, how invested is he? Is he engaging with it in the same way that we are?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I doubt it. I mean,
that's where I think we're talking about casual versus and we're still distinguishing it as celebrity fight fans.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a different level, right? But again, I understand kind of where he's coming from. I think he really encapsulated away a lot of, again, casual fans who tune in for the bigger fights feel. And again, that's really okay for them to feel that way. And they're going to start picking up on this pattern. They really are. It's going to be hard. It's been a while since we've had the Paulo Costa fight. I think what they really need, what the UFC needs, and even what Israel Adesanya needs to be able to kind of keep his name, his good name, I guess, good standing with fight fans who may want to tune in that don't normally tune in for his fight or for any fight. He needs a good, impressive, interesting, engaging fight and victory over Alex Pereira, which is obviously the fight that's going to come next. I mean, it was always the no-brainer. It's really the only one that seems to interest Israel Adesanya either. He's told me before he doesn't look very far down the rankings. He really doesn't pay that much attention to guys unless they get really close to him. And I can understand that. He's up there. It's up to them to get to him, right? But this was obviously from the time he was signed last year, and it's really not even been a year since he made his UFC debut. To get to this point is really an impressive thing, and mostly a testament to Israel Adesanya and him and the history, right?
And you look at, all kind of before we close out, like the talk about Israel Adesanya's entertainment value, which is something I never thought I'd be discussing when he was on the come up and he was putting on banger after banger or entertaining finish after entertaining finish. Like every fight on the come up almost was like a really great fight. And then we get to the championship level, which, it's also a problem that you see with like the PFL, to draw like a weird comparison here. The PFL, they reward their fighters for quick knockouts by giving them the extra points if you knock somebody out in the first round or finish them in the first round. Then you get to the playoffs and it's all about that victory. And so the fighters' tactics change completely in some ways. But that's almost how it feels here, where he's getting to the high level. And it's like now the importance is on keeping that belt. It's not so much on impressing the matchmakers so they vault you up higher and see you as a potential star.
The only thing I'm going to poke holes in that analogy, and I think on the whole I get it and I agree mostly, but the only thing I would say is that in the PFL, the regular season, pretty much if you win your 2 fights, no matter how you do it, you're going to advance because you get 6 points, 3 for each decision. So if you're a type that you can just out wrestle them for 3 rounds, and you can do that 2 times, you're going to the playoffs. So there are definitely ways around that. Unfortunately, it's just the way their structure is, because they only have 10 fighters in their division. There's definitely going to be enough that just get 2 wins that are born.
But let's give Israel Adesanya his flowers before we move back to Volkanovski and Holloway. At the end of the day, he has cleaned out his division. Like you look at the number 1 contender. I'm looking at the UFC rankings round. Number 1 contender, Robert Whittaker, 2 wins over him. Jared Cannonier just beat. Marvin Vettori, number 3, 2 wins over him. Sean Strickland just lost. He's going to drop in the rankings. He didn't make it up there. Knocked out Derek Brunson, who's number 5. Knocked out Paulo Costa, who's number 6. Fight of the year victory over Kelvin Gastelum. Number 12, Brad Tavares, beat him. It is just an impressive as hell resume. And he's climbing the ranks. He's easily the second best middleweight champion we've ever had. And he's approaching the best, which is Anderson Silva.
It's going to be a long way off of that.
It is, but
I would say
approaching it.
Yes, with every win, he's definitely approaching it. But yeah, I think it's going to be a long time before he gets there. And to kind of close out too with the idea of Anderson Silva comparisons that Adesanya inevitably gets, is some of them are fair, some of them aren't, because look, they're very similar. There are a lot of similarities, even in their career trajectories to a point. They are different people. They do deserve to have their legacies judged separately, and all that comes with it. But the thing with Anderson Silva was when he got to the championship and he won the championship, he was still finishing guys for quite a while. And then he would go up and would have these other fights at light heavyweight. Realistically, you could look at a time where it's not inconceivable to say Anderson Silva might have been the best at both 205 pounds and 185 pounds, even if he didn't actually go get that belt. You could sit there and say, I think he would have won it. And I could probably say, you know what? I get it. It's pre-John Jones. John Jones comes in, that's just a hard challenge. Before that, that belt was passed around all the time. So you could conceivably see that. But again, the point is that I'm making is that he's winning a lot of these fights by finish, right? He's putting out impressive performances. We're just not seeing the type of finishes anymore from Adesanya now that he has the belt. His greatest fight is one of the greatest fights of the last 10 years for certain. And that is against Gastelum when he won the interim belt, right? It was the interim belt.
Yep.
And then after that, he put on another very impressive performance against Robert Whittaker. He went out there. He was hungry. He wanted it. He got it. There just seems to be less urgency to put guys away and more to just hold on to your rank. And I understand it. I do understand it, because if he loses, and this was pointed out on my other podcast, if he loses, where does it all go? Like, we don't look at him and say, oh yeah, at least he went out there and he went out on a shield. No one's going to say that. They're going to say, wow, is he lost? So there's a lot of pressure on there, and I think he has kind of settled into the same thing George St. Pierre did. And that was, I am very content to get the win in the best way that I can to make sure that I can continue to have this position. And that's why I think ultimately we are going to be much more favorable to his body of work later on than we are going to appreciate each individual fight. So that's kind of where I sit with that. When you're in the conversation with both George St. Pierre and Anderson Silva for any reason, it's got to be a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, barring some tremendous drop off, like I'm talking like Tyron Woodley-esque drop off, he's going to be in the conversation for the greatest champions the UFC has ever seen. Like he wins a few more and he's in that conversation, right?
I think so. I think he can get in.
How many defenses does he have now?
I want to say it's 6.
Yeah, like, I mean, that
5
is
or 6.
A monumental task.
It depends how you view, when he became the true champion. I think he really became the true champion when he defeated Robert Whittaker. So
that's literally when he did.
Right, but it doesn't count the interim title fight there beforehand, right? So even though he's got that many championship victories, I think is a different number than his title defenses. So
yeah, and it's just a beyond impressive thing. I think that, and this is, I believe, a Luke Thomas thing, where it's far more impressive to win a belt and then just defend challenger after challenger than it is to go up and take on a second belt.
I completely agree.
I think it was Luke. I'm trying to give credit to the person who made the point, but because to do the second belt, in order to have the belt in the first place, you need to be amazing. But in order to get that second belt, you need to be great for one night to go up and get that second belt. To do it, to take on all challengers and defend it, you have to be great on every single time you go out there, because everybody is training to take you down. Everybody is you're the one with the target on your back.
And to be honest, it's not even that crazy impressive in MMA to win in multiple weight classes because of the high degree of deep, heavy weight cuts that we have. So we'll, like, on fight night, Conor McGregor at 145 pounds was probably pretty freaking huge. So for him to go up and then fight against Eddie Alvarez at the same weight, I don't think he was distinctly smaller than Eddie Alvarez. He was probably of similar size. So it's just not as impressive as it might seem to get up there, to get to that point and then win the belt in the second division. You're right. You just got to do it one time. Dude, to do it over several years is much more impressive. That's why I think a lot of people are so impressed with Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson. When I talk to fighters, a lot of fighters will name him as the fighter they most admire because of the way he did it, because of what he was able to accomplish over a body of work, and the fact that, especially too, he always pushed for a finish. He got 5th round finishes and all this type of thing. Yeah. He was never content. Jim Miller, by the way, said that Demetrius Johnson was the one he most admired. So,
oh wow,
from one fighter that is often very admired for what he does in fighting, that's who he admires the most.
So here we go with the most title defenses. He has 5 title defenses right now, because Robert Whittaker wasn't a title defense the first time; that was a title win.
Sure.
So 5 title defenses he has now. 7 is where the top 5 cracks, with Jose Aldo. George St. Pierre has 9, Anderson Silva 10, Demetrius 11, and John Jones 13. So with 2 more title defenses, he is in that top 5 list, which is a pretty substantial list of all-time greats.
I would just say that I think because Aldo's, it probably doesn't consider his WEC stuff.
No,
he actually had 1 title defense for WEC before he actually won the belt. So I feel like you have to count that, because they basically just moved that division over to the UFC for all intents and purposes. That was the top featherweight division in the world. So I think we can realistically lump that one in.
But still, just a couple more,
sure.
And he's in that conversation with, easily 5 of the greatest fighters of all time.
Absolutely, for sure. But yeah, Let's look a little further ahead now. Let's look to this Pereira fight. Obviously, we talked about the knockout and how goofy impressive it was in the sense that what was Sean Strickland doing? But he got the win.
Idiot.
Where would you rank your hype level for Izzy versus Poatan? I think that's Poatan, right?
I've been saying Pereira.
No, his nickname.
Oh, yeah.
I believe it means stone hands.
I honestly do not know.
Poatan. I am not fluent in Brazilian Portuguese.
No, me neither.
So, but nonetheless,
I'm barely fluent in English.
Yeah, same here. Good thing we write for a living. What's your hype level here, especially compared to past Adesanya title challenges?
It's funny.
And I'm talking about like the way you felt going into those fights too. If you're able to put yourself in those shoes. It's
funny because I wasn't all that hyped for Jared Cannonier.
No,
I
wasn't.
Let me look at his last few. Robert Whittaker, of course, I was super hyped for that because that's almost like what we got with Volkanovski and Holloway, where it's like, all right, we've seen this before. However, these are obviously the two guys, right? Vittorio is not super hyped about. Costa I was hyped for. Romero is hyped for.
Most people, I think, were hyped for Costa. Yeah.
This, I would say, is the most hyped I've been for an Israel Adesanya fight since Costa. Like, I was excited for Robert Whittaker, but I think that I'm more excited for Pereira just because of their history. Like, we saw how Robert Whittaker 1 went, and it wasn't even close. Whittaker 2 was obviously better, not as entertaining, but still like a better fight overall. For Pereira, we've seen that twice in kickboxing, and I don't anticipate having MMA rules is going to change too much. Maybe a little bit of pressing up against the cage. I don't know.
I could. I would actually push back on you, sir. I think we could end up seeing a lot
clinch?
more. No, not clinch. I think we could see grappling work its way in. I think Adesanya seems to be very clear about the fact that he is a mixed martial artist, and that is not what Alex Pereira is. And he does want, and this was pointed out again, but on my other podcast, he does want a submission victory. He doesn't have one on his record. If he's going to get a submission victory, this would be the fight to chase it. So no, I could absolutely see this being a very different fight than that. But also that would still lead to something interesting happening.
But here's the very interesting thing about Pereira is Israel looked good in both of their fights until the second one where he got knocked dead. But he's made a good accounting of himself. It's just Pereira got it was a decision the first time, right? And then he knocked him completely unconscious in the second one. So that's why this is so entertaining or so intriguing to me, is that like it seems as though they're pretty evenly matched. And obviously Israel Adesanya is a much more seasoned MMA fighter than Pereira is. And I think that maybe that'll show out, and maybe Israel will just completely stunt on him when they get in the octagon. But, there's always that what if. Like, we've seen a punch from Pereira knock Israel Adesanya completely unconscious. And that there's no debating that. Like, that's not like a controversial he stole a decision away from him in a different sport. It's like, no, we've seen a vicious knockout from a strike from this new challenger.
Absolutely. And I think what I take away too from that is the fact that this wasn't even that long ago. Mm-mm. Like, the knockout was 5 years ago. It was within a year of Adesanya's UFC debut. It's not like this is ancient history. I mean, 5 years is quite a bit of time in combat sports, but it's not that long ago. So it's definitely Adesanya is going to have to work out in his own head that I can do this. I will be able to do this. And he seems like a confident enough guy. At least he puts on.
Really, you think?
Look, whether he's putting on, a front for us or if he really lives it, that's only for him to know. None of us can really know. So as far as I'm concerned, I take him at his word. He seems like a confident dude, but every fighter, I think, has their doubts. I think all the fighters have their doubts in the lead up. They say, like, how can I get through this? And it's even harder when you know that you haven't beat this guy before, even if you can point to moments in fights where I was winning, whatever he needs to say. Right. Mm-hmm. And I think that is what's going to help him, is that he can find the small victories in the defeats that will help him. And that, I think he is mentally tough. That's the thing about Adesanya. I think he is very mentally tough. I would never take that away from him. I think this is a guy who knows how to get through, push through in fights, as we saw in Kelvin Gastelum. I mean, that was a war. That was absolutely a war, and he wanted all the smoke of that fight. So no, I think and especially I think he's going to be motivated to try and put on something more impressive this time out. We did see sort of the same thing manifest after the Yoel Romero fight. The next fight was Paulo Costa. People were still excited for that fight too. So it's almost like he's found the salve, like for when he has like I don't want to say a bad decision, but again, less entertaining, I think is the real framing here. A less entertaining fight. He seems to always find one opponent that's going to just bring out a lot of excitement, and everyone's like, yeah, forget that one. This is going to be better. So that's fortunate for him. And if he goes out and he does that, it's going to buy him a lot more time and goodwill if he has a fight like this again.
Yeah. And I think that this is the most likely candidate for an action fight and a highlight reel finish for either guy, right? Like, I mean, there's entirely a possibility that they just stand at range, trade leg kicks, and just wait for the other one to make a move. But I think that given the style that they have, the familiarity that they have with one another, at least in the striking realm, this has all the potential to be the comeback fight that Israel Adesanya needs in terms of an entertainment perspective.
And I think too is that there's going to be a tension that comes with this, right? Because there wasn't tension built in with Jared Cannonier. Like, as much as the UFC wanted to sell, oh yeah, Cannonier's got this power. He does. Absolutely. No question. He fought at heavyweight. He fought at 205. He's down here. He's got a lot of power for 185 pounds. There just wasn't the sense that, oh, wow, what could happen in this exchange? So if nothing was happening, you didn't feel like, oh, anything could happen here. I think this fight is very different. I think we could see the same fight play out, but we're going to feel different about it. We're always going to feel like, man, is that one strike going to be what puts him out? Because we've seen it. It's going to add to the tension. Now, if they start clinching, they start, let's say lay and pray, something like that, it definitely changes that dynamic. But if it's standing, I think this is a different animal. I think we can be entertained by it in a different way, in a tense, edge of your seat way. You know what I mean?
And especially when you have somebody like Alex Pereira probably brimming with confidence right now, like coming off a bunch of very impressive striking performances. Maybe this one, his most impressive striking performance in the UFC, definitely, against the number 4 ranked middleweight. He is, he's taken down the number 4 middleweight in extremely quick fashion, extremely brutal fashion. And then he knows that he can knock out the champion, the long reigning champion. And he's got to be feeling himself right now, right? Absolutely. He's got to be coming in like ready to just charge in potentially. And but he's also very smart. So he's not going to be like, well, let me just run into him with my hands down like Costa did, swinging wild.
Oh, definitely.
He knows, like, he's a world-class kickboxer as well, and that's why this fight is so intriguing.
Yeah, 100%. I'm totally with you. I'm excited for it.
It would be an all-time great swing and a miss if the UFC didn't book this fight next, right?
Of course, injuries can happen and that kind of thing, and then it can kind of get out of control. But yeah, I think everybody knows that this is the one. There's not. What's the other option? What else would they even think about doing? Andre Muniz, no offense, I think he's probably at this point he's like probably a win away from the title because of the body
cleaned out nature
put together. He's going to get into that top 5 relatively soon, and I think ultimately and shoot. Darren Till, if he goes out there and he wins his next fight, because they've been dying for Darren Till to fight for the title. They've just been dying for it. And honestly, I kind of hope that fight doesn't happen because I don't think it's going to entertain us either. I really don't.
But Israel has been wanting Darren Till for the longest time. Like, I think I told you this, that Eugene Behrman was like on the MMA Hour, and he was like, yeah, we're trying to get Darren Till to come train with us so we can get him a win so then he can finally fight Izzy.
I think he's probably more interested in one because they think he's better, which they always do, I'm sure, but they probably see a lot of weaknesses they can take advantage of there. And number 2, there's going to be the trash talk element. There's the fight hype element. There's the money making element. I think that will probably bring out the best in them because Darren Till likes to talk, as well. That's why someone like Sean Strickland was going to be sort of interesting here, even though I don't know if that was the energy that Adesanya was ready for at that point in the night. It almost seemed like on the press conference, which I only watch clips of. I do not watch those live. They're a shit show. I want nothing to do with them. And then to call them a press conference it's
a misnomer.
It's extremely generous. This is a media hype event. I think that's probably the more accurate way to call it, because the media participate in hyping the fight in a sense, and I don't really love those anymore.
So we have, the only people in the top 10 that Israel has not beaten are Sean Strickland, who's going to drop, Jack Hermanson, Darren Till, Uriah Hall, and Kelvin Gastelum.
Oh, Uriah Hall.
Oh, no, I mean, not Kelvin Gastelum. He's beaten Kelvin Gastelum, obviously.
Yeah.
But I'm looking at the rankings.
Muniz is going to jump in and Hall will go down.
I think that Darren Till and Kelvin Gastelum are each one win away from getting that title shot.
I think Muniz is too, though. I
think that because, Israel's wanted Darren Till. The UFC obviously wants Darren Till. And then Kelvin Gastelum, they have that would be the answer to everybody saying, oh, he has boring fights. The UFC could market the hell out of that. Oh, well, this is the rematch of the fight of the year. So that's why I think
very far away from a title fight. He's lost so many fights.
I'm just saying he might be 1 or 2 wins away from getting if still Israel up at the top. I think that's marketable, and the UFC sees that.
I guess you're probably right. I also doubt he's going to get those. So I think that's that's just the way I'm looking at it. I get what you're saying, and obviously nothing has happened until it happens. But I also just don't see him actually getting the wins necessary to get there. I think it's more likely we'll get new blood in there. Like, again, someone like Andre Muniz. I think he could go in there, and he's the type of fighter that I could actually see beating Israel Adesanya. This is not an original thought. There's a school of thought out there that also thinks that this is going to happen out there, and I'm not the first to say so. But he would be the type of fighter that when he gets there, that I would say, "Oh, let's see how he does," because I want to see how that skill set would work again.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I think Muniz, again, very, very impressive victory. And it would be great to see him get another win so he can get up to that status, right?
Sure. Now, I think we can. There were so many things that happened. There was Donald Cerrone retiring. Jessica I also retired. Yep. It was definitely an eventful night. We talked about the prelims being great. Jalen Turner looked fantastic on it. Jim Miller getting the win and retiring. Donald Cerrone on there. A lot of impressive stuff. Just to run it down real quick. But before we move on from this event entirely, I think it would be more interesting for me, especially, to hear about your experience in Las Vegas, sir, because you actually got to go. I mean, you hit on it a little bit, but yeah, talk just a little bit about kind of what was going on and what your experience was like out there.
So I've always wanted to go to like an international fight week, even if I didn't go to the fights, which I didn't. I didn't go to the fights live at the T-Mobile Arena. I did a watch party at a place that was known for being one of the better places to watch UFC events in cool. All of Vegas. And, it was a packed venue. Like, it was just loaded with people. They set up like almost like bleacher style chairs in the main room, but we had a private room. So I was down there. The Co-Main Event podcast was actually celebrating its 10-year anniversary. So they had a meetup, and I was like, oh, the people in that community are actually really, really cool. So I went and decided to join the festivities, and it was a really good time. Like, people in that community ended up being even cooler in person than they are on like the community Discord or the Patreon page that I know them from. And, I made a lot of really great friends and got to hang out with some people. Shout out to the CME community, because like they were awesome, and Ben and Chad were really cool to talk to. And it was great to just be in Vegas with a bunch of like-minded fans. They weren't like the asshats that you see in like the comment section, right? Like, where it's like, oh my God, MMA fans are the worst. No, these were like the cream of the crop. These were just like really cool people. And it was nice to have people who know their stuff to talk about MMA with while you're watching the fights, while you're going to these events. Went to like all these different things while I was down there, but it was nice to have like cool people who are also MMA fans, which if you go on Twitter, it feels like a rarity, but it turns out they actually are out there, and a lot of them are in that community. So shout out to them, because they were awesome. But yeah, I got there Thursday, which was when the press conference was. And unfortunately I arrived at my hotel a little bit too late to go to the press conference, but that night,
I think you're still better off.
I did go to the Hall of Fame ceremony where it was Cub Swanson, Doohoo Choi, which was inducted as in the fight wing. Max and who was it? God, why am I blanking? Max and Giga Chikadze. They were inducted or not inducted, but they were honored for like the Forrest Griffin Award for community service.
I see. Okay.
But Max was, in the middle of a weight cut, so he did not attend. So he recorded a video message, and then Giga was there. And then Daniel Cormier and Khabib were both inducted for the modern wing. And, Doo Ho Choi did not attend. He also recorded a video message. But it was funny. He kind of used his time to cut a promo.
That's good. That's smart.
I don't know if it was, though, because it was his time to be everybody else was giving tearful speeches about the hardships they faced. And I want to thank so-and-so because they always believed in me, and giving inspirational talks. Doo Ho Choi was this is really cool to be in the Hall of Fame. And then I think I'm actually better than ever. People say that I can't come back and win a championship, but I think I'm better than ever. I'm better than I was when I fought in this fight, and I'm ready to come back and make a statement. And it's dude, just enjoy the moment.
You know what? See, here's the thing, though. This is the weird part about inducting a fight, right? Because all you're talking about is very specifically one moment in time that these people experienced. And a lot of fighters, you want them to look back at what they've done. They really aren't interested in doing that. It's hard to do.
Especially not a loss.
No, especially not a loss. He didn't win the fight. They're not paying him for getting in the UFC Hall of Fame, I'd imagine. He doesn't get anything except a trophy out of it. So I can understand absolutely feeling that way. Cub Swanson, this can be a representation of his career. He's definitely near the end. No question. How much longer? I don't know. But he knows he's near the end. There's Father Time wins, right? So it's easier for someone like him to look back and say, oh man, this really, it kind of encompasses my career. It really makes a statement here. We have Khabib has left competition behind. We have DC has left competition behind. Much easier to look back and start appreciating. Doo Ho Choi's in there. He's not even that old. Is he 30? I don't think he's 30. I'm pretty sure he's 27, 28 years old. Maybe in my head he's younger, but he can't be that old. Maybe, you look that up for me, but if you don't mind, sir. But if
31,
this is still not old. There are several. Both of the champions who won this weekend are older than him.
I think he should have to change his name once he turns 30 to the Korean Superman.
That's true. I mean, we do have a lot of we have an abundance of nicknames that don't age with the fighter. BJ Penn was always the prodigy. I feel like at some point, the prodigy doesn't apply anymore. Once you get to a certain point, I don't know.
That's why it's hilarious. When speaking of the co-main event podcast, they call him Wonder Man.
Yes.
Even Wonder Man Thompson.
Yes.
But so yeah. Cub Swanson gave an incredible induction speech. He an emotional one. I mean, his family was sitting right in front of me. I had the hookup there, thankfully, at the UFC Hall of Fame. The guy that I've worked with on past interviews for Game Informer, he actually hooked me up with some floor tickets. So I was sitting among a lot of the fighters. And a lot of the fighters' families. So Cub Swanson's family was literally in the row in front of me, and it was so cool to be there and hearing.
You sat a few seats from Justin Gaethje, right?
Yeah, so I'm sitting there, and it's kind of John Anik is emceeing, so he's kind of giving the rundown of oh, here's what's going to be on tap, and reading the promo for Toyo Tires and UFC 276, and there's these two guys sitting next to me. On the other side of them, I see an usher walking somebody in, and sure enough, it's Justin Gaethje. And I'm like, well, there's my favorite active fighter sitting 2 seats next to me. And, we joked around a little bit over the course. Ali Abdelaziz was the guy to induct Khabib. And when he went to... he gave
his manager, Gaethje's manager.
Yes, yeah. But Ali made a thing. And he was like, all right, and now the man you've been waiting for, Khabib Nurmagomedov, and he kind of slurred when he said it's Habib's name, and Justin looks up at me and he goes, Nurmagomedov. How did he fuck that up? And it was just hilarious that Gaethje was just laughing along with everybody.
That is good. That is good.
But I did get a picture with Gaethje, which was pretty fun. He was a good guy from the limited interactions that I had. But it was cool to see obviously DC and Khabib get inducted. Khabib, he didn't read off the teleprompter. It seemed like Ali just gave him talking points to run down,
sure,
and didn't give him a script or anything. So Khabib, everybody else, I would say, got up there on stage and talked succinctly, very well-spoken speeches, emotional speeches for about 10 minutes total
in their native tongue. To be fair,
rambled semi-incoherently upwards of 30 minutes.
Oh my goodness, was it that long?
My girlfriend was there with me, and she was loving the ceremony. it got to Habib, and like I was, oh, this is like one of the greatest fighters of all time. Like he's always funny because like, you know, his cadence in which he speaks English is like hilarious. Like people have really embraced it. It's charming. And like he got to a point where he was like, am I talking too long? Like, tell me if I'm talking too long. It's like, nobody's going to tell you if you're talking too long. You're Habib. You're like,
we've seen you jump out of the cage and attack people. This has happened. We can't tell you that.
And my girlfriend was like, yes, you're talking too long. Like she was like, I think everybody was kind of done. Like we were just like, man, he talked for, because like Ali probably thought he was going to talk like very little, because I don't think anybody's heard Habib talk for 30 minutes straight. And
maybe they have.
But so he gave him like a ton of talking points, like, oh, talk about when you signed with the UFC, talk with like what legacy means to you. So he would just tell these different stories, and they were all funny in their own way. So like it was entertaining, but it was like at a certain point we're like, dude, like this is going on for way too long.
Yeah, and, like, but it's his moment, and we gave him enough time, or he's given us enough over his career. So
but it was just like, oh my goodness, dude, like just
I get it.
Nobody was going to give him the wrap it up sign, but we were all like, wrap it up, dude.
For sure.
But it was great to see a bunch of fighters like out and like supporting people. A lot of Ali people were out in force. Like, you know, I saw Bilal Muhammad. I saw well, I don't know if Chiesa is an Ali guy, is he?
Michael Chiesa, I don't believe he's represented by. Yeah, I don't think so.
And then
I don't think he's a dominance guy.
Gilbert Burns was there, obviously Gaethje. But the cool thing about sitting next to Justin Gaethje was a lot of fighters love Justin Gaethje. So like a lot of fighters would come by and say hey to him real quick. So it's like Chiesa, he did that commercial with Gaethje, obviously. So it was cool to see like Chiesa kind of like, hey man, what's up?
Were they staring at each other the whole time?
They were not staring at each other.
Oh, that's too bad.
They weren't asking about the koi pond or the limes or anything like that. No, they just, you know, fist bump like, hey, how you doing, man? Like it was just cool to like have them all come up and say hi. Like
that broke the reality of that commercial for me. Now it's over.
But yeah, like it was cool to like to see all those fighters kind of like congregating with each other, supporting people like Daniel Cormier, like Cub Swanson, like Habib. And yeah, like a lot of really special moments in those speeches. And I'm glad that I was able to go there. And big ups to the UFC for getting me into that.
So you mentioned before, I'm going to go back to when you were talking about the CME crew, getting to meet Chad and Ben. I have interacted with them from afar. Mm-hmm. I've sat behind Ben at a post-fight press conference. It was the one in New Jersey for John Jones' win over Shogun when he won the belt. If I recall, Ben is a tall individual. Is that true, or am I just misremembering?
No, I think you're misremembering. He's slightly taller than me. I'm 5'11".
Okay,
so he's not like
I'm not very tall. So I'm like 5'8". So maybe that's.
I think you're thinking it the wrong way here. This is a real like, is it glass 3/4 full or a glass quarter empty?
Be careful, sir. Careful.
This might be the last episode of Ground Pwned.
No. It's a good point. I wasn't sure if I missed. Thank you. Actually, that solved a mystery for me because I don't think he leaves the fortress in Montana as much anymore. So I don't know when I would see him in person.
But yeah, I mean, again, both of those guys are awesome too. Like they've fostered an incredible community, and that says a lot about them, right? Sure. Like, you know, there's a lot of communities out there, especially in combat sports, that just are toxic as hell. And this is the furthest thing from toxic in my experience. And I'm so glad that like I'm a part of that community.
I've had a lot of respect from afar for both Ben and Chad for a long time. They're two of the individuals in this business that I respect the most.
Same.
Both for their work and the way they engage in the conversation and the way I think they represent MMA media in a way that I appreciate. And not just in a, buttoned up kind of, professional way, which I think is also very important to have certain people who do that. And I think another person who I would actually just shout out for that is an Aaron Bronstetter, who I think represents very well in a professional but also fun way too. These are individuals I respect. So it's really cool that they have been able to, like you said, build this community. I am not part of that community. I'm just a media peer. But again, I have a lot of respect for them too. So I think that's really cool that and I saw the championship belt or belts. Did they each get a belt?
Yeah, they each got a belt.
Yeah.
The group got them a 10-year anniversary present, and that was championship belts with the Co-Main Event podcast logo on the front.
I think it was Chad who was having trouble getting through TSA because of it. They were like,
"Oh, really?
Do you have anything in here?" He tweeted something about, it's like, "Oh, do you got anything in here?" He's like, there's a championship belt in there, and the guy just laughed. Apparently, it seemed like it was.
That's hilarious.
This is just from the tweets. You can find them yourself, but yeah, it seemed like it was a pretty funny little kind of experience getting home.
Here is so I went to the UFC Expo. So Friday morning I went hiking in Red Rocks. Like I got up super early,
nice. Okay,
and with 3 other people of the CME community, we all went hiking in Red Rocks for a few hours, and that was really fun. Then later that day, we went to the UFC Expo, UFC X, and I didn't really meet any fighters because the lines were ridiculously long. I was in line to meet Mackenzie Dern, and then I was about 5 people away from getting up to like get the picture with her. And they were like, "Oh, she's going now, but don't worry, you're gonna this line is gonna transform into the Chuck Liddell line." And I'm like, "Oh, well, that's
who's Chuck Liddell?"
That's arguably
some people there, unfortunately.
And I was like, "Well, I'm just gonna stay in line then. That's awesome." And he was on stage at the time doing like a Legends panel.
Okay,
it was like Dan Severn and I forget who else. But yeah, it was just like them kind of giving each other crap back and forth. And then I was like, oh, cool. So he's probably just going to come right from the stage and over here to take pictures and sign autographs. So I'm just going to wait here. And they're like, oh, yeah, the panel's ending. He'll be over here in about an hour. And I'm like, never mind. So I got out of line.
The lack of respect for your time is
I waited in line for like 20 minutes thinking like, I'm going to meet Chuck Liddell. This is cool. And then, but so I walked around. I saw Charles Oliveira signing autographs and taking pictures. I walked right past Jessica Andrade. Saw Jan Blachowicz, Glover Teixeira, Joanna Jędrzejczyk, Gaethje was there, of course, and then it was just it was a good time. It was I didn't really do anything. I just kind of walked around. I got a trading card of myself made.
I saw that. Yeah,
that was fun. That was like the only activity that I did there. I did buy a UFC Performance Institute shirt because I wanted to buy a shirt, like a new shirt to work out in. And I
makes sense. That's good.
I refused to spend $80 or more on a shirt that just is a walking billboard for crypto.com, which was like the fight kits.
Yeah.
If they had the fight kits without the crypto.com, I'd probably pay $10 more not to have that stupid logo.
You just had it removed.
The UFC PI, it literally just has like a tiny little Venom logo on the upper, and then it says like UFC Performance Institute on the other side, and then the back is like kind of like it's like burgundy and black, and I'm like, all right, I could work out in this. This is cool.
There you go.
So I bought that. It was cheaper than the fight kits that have the giant crypto.com logo.
Well, that also makes sense. It's just a t-shirt.
Yeah. So I mean, it's like a moisture wicking t-shirt, so it's like a nicer shirt.
You are.
So I'm glad. I'm happy with that purchase. That was the only thing I really bought in Vegas, aside from the extremely overpriced food. And then we watched the fights together at a place called Blondie's. And of course, there was a bar fight that happened during the fights. It was not somebody in the CME community, but we all got to enjoy a nice little security taking down a guy and then ushering him out with haste. And then,
sounds like they've done this before.
Oh, it was remarkable at which, like the speed at which they got to this guy. It was like, I thought he was fighting with security, but no, it was a fight, like an altercation between 2 bar goers that were not a part of the CME community, but the speed, like honestly, like that might be the performance of the night bonus right there, is that bouncer. But here's something that is very indicative of the CME community. And this, like, we'll wrap up on this. When we were watching the fights, they put down a community parlay, and they put down, I think it was $940 to win $3,300 or something like that. It was some like almost 3-to-1 odds, like more than 3-to-1 odds. It was Pereira, Volkanovski, and Adesanya. So they hit the parlay, community parlay, and that's a huge celebratory moment. Everybody's like, yeah, like losing their minds that they hit the parlay because we're all watching the fights together.
Right.
And so everybody's losing their minds, and a large chunk of the CME community decided to donate their winnings to charity.
Well, that's really nice.
Yeah. So shout out to the CME community. It was a great weekend meeting everybody out there in Las Vegas. Swelteringly hot Las Vegas, but it is a dry heat. So,
that's what they always say.
But it was a great weekend. I'm really glad I went. It was kind of a once in a lifetime type of opportunity. I'm sure there'll be meetups in the future. But this was a special one, 10-year anniversary. Happy 10-year anniversary, by the way, to one of the best podcasts, period, let alone best MMA podcasts.
What are you talking about? We've only been on for a few months. What are you talking about?
We have a long way to go before we reach the heights of the CME, because those guys
They do a wonderful job. They do a wonderful job. Absolutely. I'm kidding, of course. But
so
I think we can move on because or we've got to get going here, right?
We're an hour deep
we want to get to. We got an hour deep. We don't want to reach Khabib levels here, sir.
We don't want to overstay our welcome here.
We don't.
So we have a look ahead to the UFC Vegas card this weekend.
Vegas 58. Number 58.
Headlined by an absolute banger, hopefully.
With several Rafaels or Rafaels.
Rafael versus Rafael. Mm-hmm. We've got Dos Anjos versus Fiziev, which, Fiziev, has he been in a boring fight in the UFC?
I can't remember one. Nothing sticks out. Obviously, his body of work speaks more to having more entertaining fights, more entertaining stand-up fights. This is an interesting fight here, but I do think because we have Rafael Dos Anjos, who is very much a mixed martial artist, he can kind of take this fight wherever he would like to. So that's going to be a tough thing for Fiziev to kind of overcome here. He's got 5 rounds. We've seen him fade before, and we haven't necessarily always seen that finishing power manifest in the UFC. So this is going to be an interesting fight, but I do think a lot of this sets up for RDA to look pretty good here if things go his way, right?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think
I'm not making a pick, but I'm just saying that there's a lot kind of stacked on one side here.
I mean, the RDA, I think, has the advantage here in terms of like just being a more well-rounded mixed martial artist. However, I think the winner of this is in very good position. I mean, the lightweight division is always stacked, but there's going to be a lot of hype coming off whoever takes home the victory on the weekend's headliner.
I think it'd be a lot easier for Dos Anjos to get back to the title more quickly because he's already had that championship around his waist and for at least a decent amount of time. So I think it's definitely going to help Fiziev if he wins. It's a good win to have, not only because he would prove to be the best person whose name is spelled Rafael at 155 pounds, but because it gets you in that conversation, but the conversation is so deep. We've got Islam Makhachev, we have Beneil Dariush whenever he comes back, and maybe they'll have to fight each other. But then there's also the fact that, hey, maybe Alexander Volkanovski will get his wish and get in their mix. So that throws a monkey wrench into everything. It makes it a lot harder to break through. 55 is a very hard division to break through. It always has been, may always be, for all I know. And we say always, I mean, at least for a long time. So yeah, it'll be a good win for either man either way, but I think it's still, the stakes are just a little lower here than they would be in a similar situation, just because it's going to be harder to break through. And I don't think this is going to reach banger level the same way we were kind of expecting a very exciting fight a couple weeks ago at 155 pounds with lower level ranked contenders, right? In Gamrot and Sarukian.
Yeah.
But it's a good one. I do think this is a quality main event for a fight night. I think absolutely.
We were using our 5-star hype level,
5-star scale
rating.
Exactly.
I'm going to say 4 out of 5 on this headliner.
I think 4 is fair. I like that. I think that's a good number because you do have the star power, and I do think it can be a good, interesting fight. I just don't know that it's going to manifest into being like some sort of war. So that's why I kind of ding it, I guess, down to a 4 from what could be even higher. 4 is still really good.
Yeah, I mean, this has a 5-star potential, but I'm at 4 because of the way it very well could go.
Absolutely. Also, it's kind of boring that from talking with other media members that I know, neither of them wants to really engage with the whole Rafael thing. And it's kind of lame. It's like, it's right there, guys. It's a layup. Just take it.
But looking at like the people that are ranked above both of these fighters, the winner of this is going to be set up for a pretty big fight, I think. I mean, sure. I know that we just saw Chandler and Poirier beefing at UFC 276 in the crowd. However, I mean, if Dos Anjos wins this, I would like to see Dos Anjos versus Chandler.
I don't know. I'll figure it out next week. We'll talk about that next week.
I'm just sorry. I just had the rankings in front of me, and it's like, that would be a fun fight.
Yeah, I hear you. I want to engage with it next week because we've got a lot that we can talk about next week too. So
yeah, so
we don't want to get too far cart before the horse, right?
The rest of the fight card, though.
Yeah,
what's your rating out of 5 for that?
Out of 5, I look at this card and there's 11 fights underneath it, right? It's a 12 fight card at present anyway. I think there's a chance that we might see something come back on. There was the Austin Lingo versus David Onama fight was scrapped, so they might put something together still with David Onama, who knows. But at present, I don't know, man. I think I'm putting this at a 2.
That was exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah. So we're united entirely. I think this is just, it's not a very I'm not saying none of these fighters are interesting or none of these fights are interesting, but you're talking about a much, much, much lower level of familiarity with these fighters, with accomplishment from most of these fighters. I mean, 2 of the most accomplished fighters they have on this card are fighting each other in Cynthia Calvillo and Nina Nunes, and they didn't even put them on the main card. So that shows kind of what they feel about that when they're building this. When we have a heavyweight fight on the main card, I'm always like, okay. And that's what we have with Jared Vanderaa and Chase Sherman. Jared Vanderaa, by the way, I think we pointed out before, big gamer, loves the Persona series.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So at least, there's a little bit of a gamer hook there. If you want to get behind somebody who appreciates a nice RPG.
He seems like a good dude too.
He seems like it, yeah, absolutely. But it's still a heavyweight fight, and I'm not that interested in a fight between a guy who's 12-8 versus 15-10 at heavyweight. It isn't on paper all that intriguing.
I'm always in for a Michael Johnson fight.
Yeah, anything could happen in a Michael Johnson fight. He's 20-17.
Often does.
He could win. He could lose. He could beat the best. He could lose to maybe someone you just don't think he's going to lose to. Jamie Malarkey's an interesting opponent here. And Michael Johnson is coming off of that first knockout he's had in a very long time, which I kind of thought he would actually get. I had a good feeling he was going to break the streak there, and he did do it. So that it's an interesting fight. But yeah, I mean, honestly, it's still not up to par, especially with what we've seen from some fight nights. Like the fight night game has been stepped up a little bit more in recent weeks, and this is a dip from that. So I'm putting it at a 2.
What is your most anticipated fight on anything other than the main event?
Said Nurmagomedov against Douglas Silva de Andrade. That's definitely the one. I think this is easily the one that's going to produce somebody who could break into the rankings, and that's where I think there's some interest here. Also, anytime there's a man named Nurmagomedov, you have to pay attention because most of them don't lose very often. It's not just Khabib. I think I looked it up one time on Tapology and I did the math, and I forget the number, but it's something around 90% of the time Nurmagomedovs win their fights. It's like a 900 win percentage or something. So, and that does include Khabib, but you take him out, it's still pretty high. So I think you gotta at least pay attention there.
So I'm going way further down the card actually for my pick, and then we'll move on to the gaming side of stuff.
Yes,
but Kennedy Nzechukwu. Jesus, I suck at pronouncing some names.
It's a hard one, man.
And Carl Roberson, that's a little bit easier.
Yeah,
I think that has.
Is it Roberson or Roberson? I don't remember. He's Roberson. A Jersey guy though.
That has some good potential, I think.
I would shout out Jersey.
But yeah, so Roberson and Nzechukwu. There we go.
Nzechukwu.
I think that has some action potential there.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. 205 pounds is like, it's kind of the sweet spot because you get at least, the guys who can hit pretty hard, but they're generally in better shape, I guess, and more capable of putting on, I guess, a more intriguing fight. Yeah, honestly, anything under 185 pounds is where I'm really looking for. I'm looking at 170 and below when I'm really trying. If I'm trying to build a card that's gonna just light the roof on fire, I want 170 and under. But yeah, 205 is solid. It's definitely more interesting to me than heavyweight.
But yeah, I think we've covered the MMA for this week. Goodness gracious,
I think we beat it into the ground. Absolutely, I think
there was a lot going on.
We gave it a bloody mask, just like Alexander Volkanovski did to Max Holloway. And now, not to disrespect Max Holloway, not just for his performance the other night, but for his body of work. But man, that was really impressive from Volkanovski. We definitely can move on to gaming, sir, in this last section here. So obviously you were traveling, you were busy, but I mean, you can't help but play some games. It's kind of your job. What were you playing in the last week?
So before I left for my trip, I played some Overwatch 2's beta, and that is a different thing. So Overwatch, the first Overwatch, is one of my favorite games of all time. I used to play it every single night for multiple hours. And that probably lasted about 3 years. So like I have
every night for hours for 3 years.
Yeah. That was like my nightly game, basically. Wow, after I wrapped up work, after I ate dinner, I would play Overwatch 1 for about 2 or 3 hours a night. And then I would move on to something else to end the evening. It's been maybe a year and a half since I've played Overwatch regularly. I've played every once in a while, like the events will pop up. Like, oh yeah, I'll fire it up and get my like event rewards and everything. But like they've really slowed the content to a halt.
Sure. Yeah. You've talked about this on the show too.
Yeah.
Right?
So Overwatch 2's beta comes out and it gives us all kinds of new content, new maps, new heroes to play as. So you can play as Sojourn or the Junker Queen, which are the two of the 3 new heroes that are going to come out when Overwatch launches later this year, Overwatch 2. And it changes the composition from 6v6 to 5v5, which really places an increased emphasis on the tanks. And I'm really enjoying it. It's very much like a similar game, but the way the matches flow now are completely different. And I need to play more of it before I really form like a fully fledged opinion. But I'm having a great time with Overwatch 2, and it's skyrocketing up my list of most anticipated games for the rest of the year. It already was pretty high up there, but having played it and seen like, all right, this is still a super solid game, and they've reinvented a lot of things in interesting ways without really completely turning the game on its head and making it unrecognizable. I think that Overwatch 2 is definitely going to be one of my favorite games of the year when it comes out later this year.
It is on track for release in 2022.
I think they announced that early access, which is just free to play competitive multiplayer, is October 4th, I think.
Okay.
They just announced that finally. And then the player versus player or player versus environment, which is like the co-op against the computer, basically story mode, is coming out next year at some point, and they haven't announced if that's but the multiplayer is going to be free to play. The story mode, I would imagine, they haven't announced this yet. They said they're going to tell us the economic structure at some point closer to release. So I'm like, oh, that means it's going to be premium probably.
Yeah, well, I guess we'll see, right?
Yeah, but so that I've been playing that. I played. I got hands on with a new announcement. I got the exclusive reveal of Atari 50. Ooh. The anniversary celebration. So Atari last week celebrated its 50th anniversary, which is wild. We don't get many 50th anniversaries in the video game industry because they're
going to be coming though.
Yep. Well, I mean, I remember I was impressed that we got a 40-year anniversary. I think last year was Donkey Kong's 40th anniversary, like the arcade game. But like Atari, man, they've been around so long, such a storied history, especially in those early years. But Atari 50, the celebration, gathers more than 90 games from Atari's past and lets you play them with certain quality of life improvements. You're able to remap buttons and everything. And then it's also an interactive museum. So you can go through this timeline of like the different eras of Atari and like watch videos of like former Atari people, like influential people in Atari's history talking about like, oh, we were developing this game, this was happening, like little mini documentaries basically. And then they also got industry luminaries like the Cliff Blazinskis, the Tim Schafers of the world, talking about the importance of certain games as, like how this influenced games going forward. It's really interesting. It's a compelling collection. Then there's 6 all new games developed by the company that's making this called Digital Eclipse. That's the studio. They're the ones also doing the Cowabunga collection. And they are well known for their compilation abilities, we'll say. Like they're really great at restoring older games and making them playable. They did the first Mega Man Legacy collection. They did the Disney Afternoon bundle.
I did like that. I did like both of those actually.
So they worked on all those, and they're working on the Cowabunga collection. So like they put a lot of care into their work and like restoring like the classics. And they're working on the Atari 50 anniversary celebration. And it's just a really solid compilation. It's not out until later this year, but I was able to play like a working build, and it was really fun. I'm not the biggest like classic Atari guy. I got into gaming after Atari was already like through its heyday.
Well, we were born later, so
exactly. But like I got into gaming through Nintendo, and like so I don't have like the nostalgia of a lot of the Atari games, especially like the 2600 games. And I don't think they've aged as well as like the NES and especially the SNES. But
sure.
It's really fun to go back and get kind of like these historical lessons from the people who were there.
See, I think it would be cool, because I have young kids. I think it'd be cool to give them the experience of playing some of those games because they're not colored by their experience of playing newer games, really. Like they've seen me play some newer games, but like everything is different for them, right? They don't have a lot of hands-on gaming experience yet. So I think it'd be kind of neat to give them a try at some of these games and just see how they could do. I'm intrigued by that one.
It almost feels. Go ahead.
I was going to say you mentioned they're doing the Cowabunga collection. Do you happen to know at all like what the timeline is on that? Because that one, I'm itching here for it a little bit.
No clue whatsoever. This year sometime, but something that's really if you've watched Netflix High Score documentary, this seems like the Atari 50 celebration seems like a great companion piece to that. Okay. Like if you watch,
I did
the Atari episode. And like learn all about like Atari's influence in gaming, you want to dig deeper. Whenever this comes out, this seems like the best possible way to dig deeper and like actually play a lot of these games, learn the history behind them, see like even like old magazine ads are shown up in this, and it's coming on everything. Like it's coming on PC, PlayStation, Xbox, Switch, and also the Atari VCS. If you forgot that exists, join the club.
I most definitely did not know that existed.
So yeah, that's a little like console that Atari put out, I think, in 2020 and to very little fanfare, but of course it's coming out there because it's an Atari game.
Yeah, why not?
And then while I was on the trip, I didn't play games a whole lot. I didn't play games at all while I was on the trip, aside from my dumb little Marvel phone.
You were going to Red Rock and playing your Switch.
It'd be just about as cool as going to a rooftop party and bringing my Switch, like in the old Switch ad.
But that was cool. That's what the ad said, sir.
Yeah, it is what they said. But Sonic Origins, I reviewed it for Game Informer back in a couple weeks ago. But I bought it on my Switch as well, and I decided to play through Sonic 3 and Knuckles as Knuckles, and I got through it on my flight yesterday.
Nice.
So that was a fun little thing that, like, I played through it as Sonic in for my review, so I played all the way through it as Knuckles for fun, and that was good. And speaking of Sonic, Sonic Frontiers was our cover story, which I also got hands-on with, and you can read a 16-page cover story and on Game Informer right now, but like.
Please read.
Please read. Yes. But I had a really great time with it. I can finally talk about my impressions with it, and I think that it was it's a really fun open world game. We don't need to devote a ton of time to it, but I'm really hopeful for this game. I know people look at it and they say it's like really like it looks empty or whatever, but like I think that when you take into account the speed at which you're moving through the world, it makes sense that things are further spaced out. You can't have the same speed of engagement as you would in Breath of the Wild because Link is moving through the world at like a fifth of the speed. So when you get a character that moves through the world like Sonic, it makes sense that the enemies and the obstacles, the puzzles are further spaced out. But like I really enjoyed the gameplay loop, and I'm looking forward to playing more of it.
All right.
What are you playing, Scott?
So I am still playing Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge because I kind of got the completionist itch in me. Of course. And so I ended up challenging myself, and part of it is because there's like the challenge of it. Like a game like this, to try and complete it, there's challenges involved, and it really does involve working hard to get better and not just finding the collectibles or whatever it is, where I often get kind of that completionist itch here. So for here, I made sure to beat the last level of Shredder's Revenge without getting hit, without sustaining damage.
Good God.
That took a little bit of time to maneuver, but honestly, it's a lot easier than you'd think it'd be. I don't have to get into the weeds of it, but against Krang, I mean, there's pretty much Krang against the. Oh, am I spoiling things? I'm spoiling.
You already did. It's all good.
Yeah. But anyway, against one of the two final bosses.
Who could they be?
Everyone knows, right? It's not
Toka and Rezar.
Against the first of them, there's very much a safe place that you can sit and move around because the safe spot will move. But you can go there and you can kind of just wail on the boss with impunity for a lot of the time. Sometimes if you get lucky in the attack pattern, the way it kind of plays out, you can actually finish it within like 30 seconds. Even it really does manifest that way. Then the second boss, and who could that possibly be in a game called Shredder's Revenge?
Vanilla Ice.
Who, I ask you? That one, once you figure out there's certain places you can kind of go to, it distinctly makes sense. That's why I like these old games, right? Because they were always based on like patterns and things you could learn. And then it's really about execution at that point. So then you're just trying to improve in a way that you know is kind of the path to victory, but it's still not easy to do. So that's why I appreciated it and I enjoyed it. And yeah, I had a lot of fun completing that challenge. I've gone through and I've beaten, there's 4 levels in the game where it's no damage runs for the level, and I've beaten 3 out of them. So, and at this point, the last night I was really hoping to do it after I'd recorded my other podcast. I had a little bit of downtime to kind of relax and try to come down and relax before bed. So I tried again, and I got all the way to the boss. I got hit one time and then I won, but that was it. That was as close as I got. I got so close. Yeah. So I think the last thing I have to do is I need to beat the game in arcade mode on hard. That's the only thing I have left as far as
that sounds tough though, because it
does sound tough. Yeah, but I do want to do that with like a group. I'm definitely going to multiplayer that.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, I'm still playing through Shredder's Revenge. I've not made it to the end. I've been spreading my playtime across 3 platforms, so that would explain it. PC, Switch, and Xbox. I'm playing on all 3 of those platforms. I've kind of fallen off completely on the PC version. I'm not going to lie. I'm just going to play on Switch and Xbox going forward. But I'm having a great time with it. And I will say that I don't know if I plugged this last episode or not, but I had the composer of Shredder's Revenge, T. Lopes, on my other podcast. So if you want to hear a conversation between me and him, go check out All Things Nintendo from a couple weeks ago. And it was a really good chat. He also composed Sonic Mania. So he's a really great retro style composer. And he's a really interesting guy too.
I agree. I would say listen to Brian always.
So a couple little news pieces to get to before we get out of here, Scott. There was a Nintendo Direct Mini that we can just run down a couple of the bigger things that came out of that. We got another look at Sonic Frontiers. They showed off the cyberspace levels, which are like, this big open world game or open zone game as they're coining it. However, there are linear, like Sonic style, like traditional Sonic style stages that you're running through to earn bonus rewards and everything to progress the story. So you have to complete those levels, but you're getting through, you're also, it's all in the framework of these giant open worlds, right? So that's something that they showed off and revealed. You can also read more about that on the cover story.
Yeah, you can. And you should.
Mega Man Battle Network Legacy Collection. If you liked those games, Game Boy Advance, that's coming in the future. We got I would say the theme of this, I tweeted this, the theme of this Nintendo Direct Mini, this was all focused on third-party titles, by the way. No Nintendo news out of this whatsoever. No Nintendo developer news at all out of this. But the theme of this was amazing games from other consoles are coming to Switch. And those games are Nier Automata, Persona 3, Persona 4, Persona 5, Portal 1, and Portal 2.
That's the one I'm most excited for.
Yes, so good. Some of the greatest games of all time are on that list that I just rattled off there. But there's some other cool stuff too. Super Bomberman R2. I did not like Super Bomberman R when it came out. It was a launch title on Switch. It was plagued with so many problems. I reviewed it for Game Informer, gave it a 5 out of 10, one of the lower scores that I've given in my career at Game Informer. But it was that they solved a lot of those problems. They added content. They fixed the network of the first one. So I'm hoping they learned a thing or two of Super Bomberman R. They're doing a remake of the old PlayStation game, Pac-Man World.
Okay.
The old PS1 game is getting a remake, and it's Pac-Man World Repack, and it looks like just a modern 3D platformer now, which looks really cool. Some other like quick highlights. Live Alive looks amazing. There's a demo available now for that. That's an old Super NES RPG that never came to the West, but it's like you're playing like, I think it's 9 different characters across 9 different eras across the globe. So like there's like one that's like in feudal Japan, and there's one in like the Old West. And somehow the stories all tie together, but they're doing it in like the HD 2D, like that you saw in like Octopath Traveler and Triangle Strategy. It looks absolutely gorgeous, but there is a demo available now that your save actually transfers over to the main game when it comes out later this month. That looks incredible. But the star of the show, I would actually say, so we got Mario Rabbids 2, so Sparks of Hope. We got gameplay of that, which it looks good. The star of the show, I would say for a lot of people, is Harvestella. And you probably never even heard that word before, but Harvestella, it is a farming simulator, which you would be like, immediately I was like, oh, well, this isn't for me. It's like kind of anime style farming simulator. And they're like, oh, the seasons, you want to keep your farm alive and active. And
it sounds like Harvest Moon.
The seasons flow from spring to summer, from summer to fall, from fall to winter, from winter to the season of death, quietus. And we're like, what?
Well, that's normal.
And like these like monsters invade and like crops wither. And basically your entire thing is, all right, you build your farm up over the course of the year. And then you get to the season of death and you have to like fend off these enemies and like basically fight to survive and keep your farm alive through that season of death. And then it gets back to like the normal seasons where like your crops can kind of flourish.
It's like The Purge, but on a video game farm.
It sounds so cool. And like there's combat mechanics and like it just looks like it has a lot of potential. And I think it caught a lot of people's eye when they announced that. But yeah, I think that's a quick rundown. And Railgrade looks awesome. It's like it's just like if you like kind of like city builders, you're just building a rail system around this small town to try to like make it so that you can like ship and receive stuff to like restore the economy of a small town. It just looks like a fun little satisfying simulation game.
That looks like a game I would play in front of my my vehicle obsessed children. And they would be very interested. And one of them is going into second grade now. He's a bright kid. Maybe he's ready for like trying out some of that. So we could say.
And then actually, I want more shout out Dragon Quest Treasures. So it's a spinoff of Dragon Quest 11, starring two of the characters there. It's like a prequel story, but it looks like it takes a lot of cues from Pokemon, a lot of cues from Monster Hunter and Breath of the Wild in terms of like you're using these monsters that you go out into the world to like tame. So kind of Pokemon Monster Hunter where you're fighting these monsters and then you're also having them join your team. And then it looks like Breath of the Wild style exploration, but you use the little monsters that you capture to join your team in the exploration. So like you can use like slimes to bounce off and like reach higher ledges, or you can jump off a ledge and use like a Draki, which is like kind of like a bat-like creature to glide down like and reach further distances. So that was one that caught my eye as well. So looking forward to that as well. But there was one that you wanted to talk about in particular, not associated with the Nintendo Direct Mini, but something that you want to talk about in gaming world before we wrap up today.
Yeah. So I had seen at some point, it was a few days ago, I think, that Sucker Punch developer was talking about that they have no plans, quoting, this is quote, no plans to revisit Infamous or Sly Cooper right now, end quote. Now I didn't play as much of the Sly Cooper games. I know a lot of people really love them, so I don't want to dismiss that, but I don't have as much of an attachment to it from not playing it. But Infamous, I played all of those games, and it's a little disappointing for me to hear that, because I mean, I think that they could do something on the PlayStation 5. I think it would be very interesting to see them do that, but they're just not interested in doing that. Do you think they should revisit either of these series?
I think they should. I don't know if right now is the right time, because the Ghost of Tsushima IP is so hot right now.
And that does seem there was obviously the implication from not saying that they weren't doing that. You kind of read between the lines and say, well, you're saying you're not doing these, but you're not saying no to the other one. So yeah, I think you're probably right. I think we can at least harbor the dream that maybe they are working on Ghost of Tsushima 2.
I think they
whatever
are.
They're going to call it. Yeah,
I think they are. And there's also a movie coming out of Ghost of Tsushima.
Interesting.
That I am very much looking forward to that. But Infamous, I love that series. I even liked the most recent one, Second Son.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people crapped all over that. I still had a really good time with that.
That was fine. It wasn't
PS4
great,
launch title.
Yeah. And
it was very much a launch
easiest
title.
games to platinum if you just play it to completion.
Yeah. But Sly Cooper, I know there's a very dedicated fan base to that, but I would much rather have an Infamous game, especially on PS5, and see what they could do with that. But honestly, I don't think anything would make me more excited than another Ghost of Tsushima game from that.
Well, you
studio.
really loved that game, right?
Ghost of Tsushima might be my favorite game from last generation, aside from maybe Overwatch.
Wow.
I loved Ghost of Tsushima.
Really
and by the way, plays like a freaking dream when you fire it up on PS5, and or especially if you're doing like the director's cut. Like that's what I played the DLC on. Man, was that fun. Like that is just a great, it just is so smooth. Like it felt like I was playing a next gen game when I was just playing the PS4 version on my PS5. That was the first thing I did on my PS5 when I got it, by the way, was I fired up Ghost of Tsushima, and I was like, oh my God, everything just feels so much better running on this machine. And then when the director's cut came out, which was a native PS5 version, that was just the pinnacle of that. So, I mean, if you like the old school style of Assassin's Creed games, I can't recommend Ghost of Tsushima enough if you haven't played it yet.
You know, I had a thought the other day because I was thinking about, older games and games that we love based on, times they came out and everything like that. And I had put up, and no one really engaged with it, but I had put up people to list their favorite game from each decade, 80s, 90s, each decade I've been around for anyway, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s, and 2020s. I think we can also put in there too. It's here, right? And I think I had put Ghost of Tsushima as my 2020s game. I feel like that would be an interesting topic for us to kind of engage with some point. Like our favorite games from each decade. Maybe we could do that for our potentially we could do that for our show, which there's a time where I'm going away, sir, and
so am I.
We're looking to do something that maybe isn't going to engage with the news of the week. So maybe we can do something fun like that. There's an option. We got a lot of those in our little queue here. We're gonna have a lot of fun with it when we get there, Brian.
I think so. But I think that's all for this episode, though, Scott.
I think you're right. I think we can wrap it here. And if you like this show, if you like the episode, make sure you subscribe if you're not already. We're on Apple, Spotify, YouTube. Make sure you tell the people you know. Let's help us grow. Spread the word. And if you would kindly follow our social handles at Brian P. Shea and at Scott_Fontana on Twitter and Instagram, we'd appreciate it.
And of course, if you want to reach us with questions, feedbacks, or topics you'd like to hear us talk about, hit us up at groundandpwnedpod@gmail.com or at groundandpwned on Twitter. Until next time, enjoy the fights, enjoy the games, and we will talk to you next week.